Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like everything looks fine on the outside, but deep down, something feels off. It's not always a dramatic failure that gets us here. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's the right decisions made for the wrong reasons. It's the safe path, the expected steps that slowly silence the part of you that used to feel fully alive. You adjust, you adapt, you play the role, until one day, you wake up in a life that resembles you, but isn't really yours. What if this isn't just a bad phase, but a kind of alternate reality? Not one built by a computer, but by tiny, unconscious compromises, influences, expectations, and all the moments when you said yes to things you wanted to say no to. Neuroscientist António Damásio found that our bodies know before our minds decide. That discomfort you feel, it's not weakness, it's a message. Maybe it's an invitation to stop, to notice. The problem isn't you. It's the version of you that was built to survive, not to live. But what if there's still time? Time to return to the version of yourself you were meant to become. In this video, we'll explore how these wrong lives are created and how small, precise changes can realign your entire future. If this speaks to you, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. That's how YouTube knows this matters, and that this message deserves to reach someone else who needs it. We grow up being told that life is about making good choices, but no one tells you what a good choice is when you don't even know who you are yet. Most of us choose based on three things: fear, convenience, or expectation. And the tricky part is, it works. You land a job, you get a place, maybe even a stable relationship. From the outside, it looks like success. But inside, it feels like something's gone missing, like you're watching your life from a distance, like you're stuck in a version of you that's not actually you. There's a name for this feeling. Psychologist and researcher Dan McAdams calls it narrative incongruence. It's when the story you're telling the world doesn't match the one you feel deep inside, as if you've become a character written by someone else, and it happens more than we realize. Neuroscience tells us that over 90% of the decisions we make are unconscious, which means most of your life may have been shaped by automatic patterns, invisible social pressure, and small moments when you said no to your true self. But this isn't just a psychological issue. It's existential. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Hell is other people." But for many, hell is living without authenticity. Because to live without authenticity is to exist in a parallel reality where you survive but never really live. This video isn't here to convince you of anything. It's just here to switch on a light, to ask one simple question. Is the life I'm living right now truly mine, or is it the safe version someone else imagined for me? The life you're living today may have been built on choices that felt perfectly right at the time. But what happens when a right choice comes from the wrong reason? You took that job because it felt safe. You stayed in that relationship because starting over seemed too hard. You moved to that city because it's what others expected of you. On paper, it all made sense, but inside, something felt wrong. That's where the drift begins. Not through a dramatic mistake, but through 1,000 tiny detours, so subtle you didn't even notice them happening. You follow the logic, you adapt, you survive, until one day you realize that the life you've built, no matter how functional, how respectable, feels unfamiliar. This feeling has a root. Psychologist Barry Schwartz in The Paradox of Choice explains that decisions made to avoid regret lead to less happiness over time, compared to choices made from genuine inner clarity. In other words, every time you choose out of fear, convenience, or pressure, you move one step further from yourself. And that distance isn't neutral. It numbs you, it silences you, it traps you in a life where you are the actor, but never the author. But how much of this life was actually written by you? According to neuroscience, over 90% of the decisions we make are unconscious. That means most of your life might have been shaped by invisible habits, cultural scripts, and unspoken expectations. You're influenced by what you consume, by the people you surround yourself with, by the images you see, the advice you were given as a child, the idea of success you inherited without even questioning. Over time, you stop choosing and start repeating. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet discovered something remarkable. The brain shows activity before you're consciously aware of making a decision, meaning what you call a choice might be a script already running inside you. It's not your fault, but it's also not your truth. The moment you pause, something shifts. You ask, is this really me choosing, or just a pattern playing itself out? The answer doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it arrives as a feeling, a discomfort, a weight in your chest, a restlessness you can't quite name. That's not weakness. That's your system trying to wake you up. Neuroscientist António Damásio calls it the somatic marker hypothesis, the idea that your body senses what your mind hasn't processed yet. Your gut knows. And when you're out of alignment, it starts to speak through tension, anxiety, or quiet sadness. Your pain isn't punishment. It's a compass. It's trying to show you where the misalignment is, where something went off course, and most importantly, where to begin again. Sometimes the clues are in the lives you almost lived, the yes you were too afraid to say, the no you swallowed to keep the peace, the risk you turned away from that still haunts you in quiet moments. These alternate lives live inside you, not as regrets, but as echoes of who you could have been. Philosopher Derek Parfit once said that personal identity isn't a straight line, it's a web of possibilities. You're not just the sum of what happened, you're also everything that almost happened, everything you nearly became. And the beautiful part, those versions of you might still be waiting. You don't need to burn it all down. You don't need to move to another country or reinvent yourself overnight. Sometimes you just need to remember and start with something small, something symbolic, a single step toward your truth, a choice that looks invisible to the world but feels like oxygen to you. Because deep down, you've always known. There's a part of you that never gave up, even when you forgot, even when you adjusted, even when you played it safe for too long. That part of you is still there, waiting for you to come home. Maybe this is the beginning of that return. There comes a moment when you realize you don't need to change everything. You just need to adjust the angle. Just a few degrees. Just enough to start pointing your life back toward yourself. People think transformation comes from big events, a breakup, a move, a career switch, a breakdown. But most of the time, it starts with a quiet moment, a pause, a whisper inside that says, "This isn't me anymore." That whisper is everything. You don't need to burn bridges. You don't need to prove anything. All you need is to listen deeply and start saying no to what dims your light. Because every time you say yes to what you don't believe in, you say no to the version of you that could have thrived. And here's the truth. The wrong version of your life didn't come from one big wrong turn. It came from dozens of small moments when you silenced your knowing, when you traded truth for comfort, when you let the world's noise drown out your own voice. But the most powerful thing you can do now is to reclaim your authority, not over people, not over outcomes, but over yourself. You've heard people say, be the author of your own story. But what they don't say is that this often means rewriting entire chapters you once swore were permanent. It means forgiving the past version of you who didn't know better and giving yourself permission to evolve without shame. In this process, you may lose people. You may lose versions of yourself that no longer fit, and that will hurt. Because even a cage becomes familiar when you've lived in it for too long. But growth is not about adding more. It's about subtracting everything that isn't you. The less you pretend, the more space there is for what's real. You'll start noticing it in tiny ways, the way you breathe around certain people, the way your energy drops when you open certain messages, the way your body resists routines that used to feel normal. These aren't coincidences. They're micro-signals of misalignment, and your job is no longer to ignore them, but to decode them. Everything is information: your emotions, your fatigue, your resistance. And when you begin treating those signals as data, not defects, you'll stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start asking, "What is this trying to tell me?" Because here's the paradox: the more you chase the ideal version of yourself, the further you drift from your authentic one. And maybe, just maybe, the real work isn't to become someone else, but to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. As Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This process is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming real. And realness comes with consequences. It may cost you the approval of others, but it will give you back your integrity. It may feel lonely at first, but it will reconnect you with the only person who can live your life, you. So what now? What do you do with all of this? You begin small. You make one decision today, not from fear, not from guilt, but from alignment. You ask yourself, what does the version of me I want to become do next? And then you do that. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently. You repeat that choice tomorrow, and again the day after, until you no longer feel like you're acting in your own story, but actually living it. Until your days feel like a reflection, not of your obligations, but of your values. That's when you know you've returned. Not to an old identity, not to a fantasy, but to your origin point, to the quiet, steady place inside that always knew the truth. And even if it's been buried under years of noise, it never left. You didn't lose your path. You just stopped listening. But the signal is still there, still waiting, still pulsing beneath every breath. And now, you're finally quiet enough to hear it again. So maybe now, you've started to see the cracks, the quiet ways you've been drifting, the parts of you that got lost in the noise. And maybe you're ready to stop running, to stop pretending, to start again, not from scratch, but from truth. Because what comes next is not about fixing yourself. It's about reconnecting with your rhythm, with your values, with the version of you that was always there, just waiting to be remembered. And here's the thing. Once you remember, you can't forget again. Something inside you changes, and you start seeing everything differently. You'll know what I mean in just a moment. There's something else you need to hear, something that might shift your path even further. It's right here on the screen. Just press play. Until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.